Thank you very much. And good evening. My name is Rosanna Bichelli. I'm the manager of Research and Accountability Department. And I'm here today to provide an update on the additional analyses that were conducted on the student census data. As a reminder, the student census was conducted in 2021. And I have been here before reporting on the identities of our student body and disaggregations in terms of school experiences and belonging. Today, I'm reporting on academic achievement, looking at elementary and secondary achievement of our students, disaggregated by a number of identity characteristics. As a quick reminder, the student census aligns with our HDSB multi-year plan with the various pillars that speak to equity, inclusion, and human rights, and in particular, our Indigenous framework. It also aligns with our Ontario's Education Equity Action Plan, and it was actually a mandate from the Equity Secretariat. And it aligns with the Ontario's anti-racism data standards and the Anti-Racism Act, which was published in 2017. So all public sector organizations are mandated by their respective governing body to gather identity-based data and then to analyze the data to identify patterns of disparities and disproportionalities in the communities that they serve. So this is just a very quick slide to demonstrate the formula that it used to calculate the disparity indices. So we look at the percentage of students from a particular group in a particular outcome or program, and that is divided by the percentage of students from that group in the overall population of the HDSB student body. And from a human rights and equity perspective, and as well as guidelines given to us by the Anti-Racism Directorate, equity is defined by parity. So here we would be looking at a disproportionality index of 1. Anything above 1 is deemed a disproportionality. So starting with elementary academic achievement, here we're looking at who the students are that are achieving below a level 3. And we have, these are report card grades in language, math, and science. And we have the various racial categories given to us by the Anti-Racism Directorate. So again, public sector organizations were mandated to use those categories. Any bar above the green line would represent a disproportionality in achieving below level 3, so essentially not meeting the standard. And as one can see across the language, math, and science, unfortunately, we are not seeing all bars added above the green line. There are some bars that are quite high. So for instance, when we're looking at language, we have our Indigenous students who are 1.66 times more likely to achieve below a level 3. We have our Black students that are 1.45 times more likely to achieve a below level 3, and so forth. So across the three domains, we do see areas of disparities and disproportionalities across racial categories. Next, we looked at gender identity, again, as defined by the Anti-Racism Directorate. Students could choose among a variety of gender categories. For the sake of the bars, we grouped gender non-binary students as gender diverse. And then we have girl, woman, and boy, men. And again, we see areas of disproportionalities with our gender diverse students being more likely to achieve below a level 3 in language, math, and science. And we also see some disproportionalities in students who identify as boy or man. When we look at sexual orientation, this was, again, a question that included a number of response options. Just, again, for sake of presentation, we have grouped those categories as sexual diverse. The green represents students who identify as straight and heterosexual. So for those students, they're actually quite at par. So relative to the proportion of students in the overall HDSB population, straight and heterosexual students are at par with what one would predict given their representation. But sexual diverse students are disproportionately achieving below level 3 in language, math, and science. And for sexual orientation, this question was asked for grade 7 and above in accordance with our curriculum documents. Next, we looked at our multilanguage learners who would have previously been defined as ELL or English language learners. That term has now been switched with MLL or multilanguage learners, and we're seeing some disparities there as well, with students who are learning English being 1.5 times more likely to achieve below level 3 in language and math, and 1.33 times more likely to perform below level 3 in science than what their overall population would predict. Next, we have students with an individual education plan, whether that is gifted or identified or non-identified. And here again, we're seeing some areas of disproportionalities in all domains, so language, math, and science, and about 2 times more likely to essentially perform below level 3. Next, we looked at secondary credit accumulation, and here were the disparity indices indicate students were less likely to have sufficient credits to be on track to graduate. And that was defined by the very specific grade the students were in. So we looked at grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12, and looked at whether they had achieved the required number of credits that would put them on a path to graduate by grade 12. And we see similar patterns of disparities with our Indigenous students being 2 times more likely almost to not have sufficient credits to be on track to graduate, our Black students as well, Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian students. Likewise, for gender diverse, 1.43 times more likely to not have sufficient credits to be on track to graduate, followed by students who identify as boy and men. And similar to our elementary students, sexual diverse students are 1.5 times more likely to not have sufficient credits to graduate. Similar to our multi-language learners, 1.5 times more likely. And similar to elementary or students with an IEP are 2.2 times more likely to not have sufficient credits to graduate on time. So in terms of our next steps, there are a number of ongoing initiatives and priorities that the board is involved in to address these disparities. We have a student census data committee that is looking at the programs and the strategies available to support schools and students to help us further understand the areas of disparities and to address the systemic gaps that exist. Through the Human Rights, Indigenous Education and Equity Department, there's a lot of ongoing staff professional development that is happening to help staff better understand their student population and how to best support every single student. And as a board, we'll continue to monitor the student experiences and outcomes. So these findings will be available as the other findings have been already shared on the public website, HDSB Student and Staff Census. And I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much for your report tonight. I just wonder if you could speak to if this is baseline data. In other words, have we collected this data in any other year, and have we got any comparative data to look at?
So the HDSB, not unlike other school boards, have not collected race-based and identity-based data prior to the 2021 year. So this is, in particular, the disparity indices. This would be our very first set of data available to us. However, I will say that having looked at other school boards that have already collected this data, in particular the Toronto District School Board, there are similar patterns of disparities that come up. And it speaks to a larger societal issue and societal patterns that we see with those communities, unfortunately. And it speaks to, this is why we have an anti-Black racism strategy in the province. And this is why we have the centering of gender diverse and the 2S LGBTQ plus voices, because there are systemic issues that disproportionately impact those communities. So we are in a position now through the mandate of the equity strategy and the ARD to be able to gather this data on an ongoing basis. And it will be something that the board, like other school boards, will continue to do to monitor the impact of the various work that has been done.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you for your report. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you very much for having me.